Hello. Hello. This video is going to be about satins. Satins are one of the more popular embroidery types. And to create satins in EmbroideryWare, you create them by drawing, again, I repeat it again, lines and curves. Satins are based off of lines and curves. And every embroidery object in EmbroideryWare is made out of lines and curves. So let's just draw a curve, which is a circle, which is composed of four different curves. As you can see, there's 1, 2, 3, 4. You would have already known this if you saw the lines and curves videos. If you have not seen the lines and curves videos, it's very imperative that you understand why everything in EmbroideryWare is based off of lines and curves. Lines and curves are basically the base type that everything gets built out of in EmbroideryWare. So here we have a circle, which is just running stitches. So to make it a satin, we can go down and we can choose the type under stitches and turn it into a satin. Or we can select automatic satin here on the menu as a shortcut. Again, these shortcuts are simply just that. They're already setting some predefined settings, satin, etc., by pressing that button. It's a quick button. It's not a new feature. It's just basically setting it to satin to certain parameters. We can also set it to a manual satin, which we'll describe later. That allows you to move the points. So let's go back to the automatic satin. And let's look at the property explorer to understand the different properties of a satin. So when you change it to a satin, you'll get different settings for satin. And what is a satin exactly? If we zoom in here, we can see that a satin is simply what looks like a zigzag curve, but it really isn't. It's one straight parallel curve about the object, and then there's an angular curve that goes to join with that. So they, in essence, lay pretty much parallel to the graphic in the center. Now, if you notice here, it looks like now we have three graphics, and in actuality, we do have three graphics. These two graphics here are created when we create the automatic satin, and they're based off of the width inside and the width outside. So there's the middle graphic, it's still the base graphic that determines everything. If you notice that the two lines here move along with the center graphic when I move it. So here we haven't drawn these two lines or curves. EmbroideryWare has done that. But again, everything's based off of lines and curves. So in this case of the satin, these two lines and curves, these lines from the outside determine where these satin lines go. It's like a fill in a way, and that it defines the borders of where the satin will go. So you're probably wondering, well, that's maybe not the right width of satin that I want. So to change the width of the satin, you just change the parameters here in the Property Explorer, and you can change the width of the satin. Now there's also things called satin spacing. Now satin spacing is how closely these pairs of lines will be joined. You can see that here they're pretty close, and 4, which is 4/10 of a millimeter, in general works pretty good. Embroidery thread is in that range, so basically they would lay down pretty good. So if you want to change the spacing of the satin to make it more coarse, you raise the number. So if we raise the number, you can see that the satin is getting coarser. All right, so right here we have the basic satin type. Now, if you look at the satin shape, it defaults to satin type whenever you press this button. It will default to satin type. But you'll notice that there's different types here. So if you truly wanted just a zigzag, you can choose zigzag, and now you can see that it's zigzagging like you normally expect. We have a square, which basically they're completely parallel, and it goes here and goes there and goes here and goes there. We look at that with the graphic turned off, or in the 3D mode, you can see it looks like that. Um, we have a satin shape called square soft inside, square soft outside. Basically, this is similar to the soft edges in a fill, where these aren't exactly lined up, so they end up being softer on the edges. This is more important if you got really close stuff, and this is only really useful in the square mode. I mean, if we had this really close, like we had a satin spacing of 4, you would see that basically this is still a fairly long stitch. But if we turn this off to back to square, you can see that these are really close. And a lot of times, if this is too close, it actually, the needle might go through the same hole practically, and you might get thread nests on the bottom. So what we do with this is the soft inside and outside kind of helps with that if you want that technique. Again, in EmbroideryWare or in any embroidery, you know, you design something and you stitch it out. You stitch out a lot of samples before you commit to any kind of types. Most of embroidery is just trial and error, trying to figure out what does and doesn't work for the particular fabric or the particular thread or the particular design you're doing. It all is something that it has to be tried. You can't just simply do a design and expect it to always work out. After you get practice, you can probably anticipate what will and won't work, and you can probably just go straight for the design and just stitch it out. But I recommend that you always try out your designs first on something that's not that important. You don't want to put it on some heirloom napkin or something from the family and basically you've destroyed it. You want to make sure that you have tested everything out. Okay. So these satins aren't joined. And right now, so like for example, if I wanted to make a box, let's say, and that's not a box. Okay. Let me change this to 4. This menu, basically these are quick shapes, and if you look on here, you can have different settings. So setting it to a 4 will make a 4-sided polygon, which basically is a box. So I'm going to make this box here. I'm going to make a frame around something. So let's see, I got a frame, and I'm going to turn this into a satin, and I want it to be a fairly big satin, so I'm going to change these to 20. All right. And I'm going to go ahead and change. Something's wrong here, right? I mean, it doesn't look right. Shouldn't it be like square, I mean, nice mitered corners on all edges? Well, this satin isn't closed. So EmbroideryWare assumes you just wanted it blunted off like that. So to actually close it, you need to choose a close command, which is here. It's also on the menu, but I need to turn that back on so you can see that. I'll do that in a moment. So now it's mitered off, and you can see that now it makes a nice little box. Like if you were going to put some sort of thing inside this box, you would have a nice mitered, like picture frame effect. Okay, I've turned the closed unclosed option back on, and you can see now you click the close unclose button, it closes and uncloses for the box. That also can be done here under the Feature Explorer. Again, a lot of these, I'm repeating myself a lot, aren't I? But a lot of these tools are just simply shortcuts to selecting things in here yourself. And you'll find that you'll probably end up using the shortcuts a lot. Okay, so now we have a box and we have these satins. So if you look in here, there's other features, and we have other features in here that I will describe when I do the next step, which is a manual satin. So let's go ahead and delete this box, and we'll draw some lines. We'll just draw a nice curvy kind of shape. to demonstrate manual satins. So an automatic satin, basically, those two graphics that I described get automatically generated. Okay, and you can see here that my curve is kind of wonky in places. And that's primarily because we don't have enough points to help EmbroideryWare figure out the parallel lines. So the way that the parallel curves get created is EmbroideryWare actually mathematically uses these points and the endpoints to create parallel sets of, of control points. So if you can see, we have this manual satin here, and you can see that these control points are basically all parallel to each other. And if you drew some lines between these, you would realize that basically EmbroideryWare has offset the control points and the end points to figure out how to draw this parallel satin around. But down here, it's very sharp and it doesn't look great. So the way you can fix that is you just basically add more points. So now that this is defined, we can add more points by just choosing the add new point, by choosing a point on the curve. Now, we talked about these in the lines and curves thing. So basically what we're doing is we're now manipulating the base graphic. Again, emphasizing once again that everything's driven by these two graphics in EmbroideryWare. So we can basically click along here and add some more points. And you can see by doing that, we've actually smoothed that out so that now it looks a lot more parallel. But you know that there's also some grouping of satins down here as well. So we can do that with this here, and we can just click along here and add some more points. Now, it's important to let you know that basically the way EmbroideryWare does the satins is these endpoints somewhat drive where the satin goes. And so you can see by having more of them, it ends up making it perpendicular here at this point. And so it makes it more uniform. Okay, I'm going to undo some of this here because we're going to have some fun now. So not only do these control points affect how embroidery works, you can see that I can't do anything with this endpoint because it's being driven by the center curve. So if I move the center curve, I can. But I can't move this curve because it's an automatic satin and it's driven by the baseline graphic. So these children graphics that I'm calling them, these offset curves, what if I wanted to kind of taper the satin at the ends? Well, in an automatic satin mode, you can taper the ends by choosing different end styles on here. And so if we look at this end cap, satin edit type, I'm looking, sorry, can't seem to find it. Oh, here we go. So edge offset type. So if we go taper up or taper down, we can change the tapers on the end. So let's just say taper ends. And you're like, well, Jim, nothing changed. Well, when you choose an edge offset type, these edge offsets end up needing to be changed to some value. If we change it to 1 in this case, you notice that the ends get tapered down all the way down to the whole width of the satin, the outside inside. And here we've actually tapered these down. I'm going to add a few points here just to make this prettier. So you can see kind of what it's doing. And let's get rid of some of these points just so that we can look at it as one curve. All right, so we got one curve here. You can see that it's tapering from the two edges or two ends up, and that looks kind of nice. I mean, so you can very quickly make something creative like this. Now, some weird things can happen when you stretch it in certain places. You can see the satin double up on itself, and that's primarily because if you look at these curves and see how they lay out, they'll end up doing that. Okay. So this is all during the automatic satin setting, which automatically sets these items. Generally, we're not going to probably do that too much. We're going to do what's called a manual satin, which I'll get to in just a moment. But I just wanted to show you the different kind of end types that we have available to you. So if we look at this edge offset type, we've got tapered ends. We have tapered up, which means it tapers, oops, didn't select it, taper up, which means it tapers from here to here. So you have that kind of thing. We got taper down, which means it tapers from the start down. You can see here's the start with the green and down. We can see that so those are the different tapers that we can have in those modes. If we end up making these do weird things, like if we actually say, oh, I want this to taper a -1 and a -1 here, what do you think will happen? Well, it actually did not what I expected it to do, so never mind on that one. I don't know what I'm trying to show here. Yeah, so let's say we say taper 2 instead. Taper 2. Oh, right, 20? What's that going to do? Oh, all right. I'm a little confused right now. I think this is actually interesting. If I do -20, you can play around with these and see what it actually does. It should go, oh, that just makes it shorter. Yeah, so anyway, these will actually taper to the dimension that you type. So here we're just gonna, it's gonna just taper to 5 at the end. If I set this to 0, I don't think it does anything. Set it to 1, it's gonna taper down to 1. Right, okay. Anyway, so that's what those things do. So next we're going to talk about manual satins. Okay, this is, we're going to talk about manual satins. So manual satins are basically the ability to change these two curves as well as the center curve. So if we wanted to just go ahead and turn the taper off, so we're not going to do any taper, we'll just say, we're going to just go ahead and go 0, 0 here under these things. Now we turn the taper off. And we changed this to a manual satin here, where it says manual. We changed it to true, which in EmbroideryWare we have false and trues for on and off, basically. True is on, false is off. Now, when we go in, we go to edit points, you'll notice that we can actually now move the curves, the child curves of the object, and we can do our own manipulation of the ends. And you'll find that probably these manual satins will be something that you will use a lot, because most of satin embroidery, especially with letters and stuff, is just a bunch of manipulations of these ends in a satin, and you can create some pretty neat things. So let me show you how this becomes useful. So let's say we're going to go ahead and do a letter. That's one of my favorite phrases, ignore that. So let's see, I'm going to choose something that is kind of um, a fun design that has a lot of curves to it. So we're going to just change this to the Edwardian font, and we're going to just say, we're just going to put in something like P or something. All right, you change this to, let's see, something else. Forte, I think, has, no. Looking for something that has a lot of variation in it. Okay, we'll just use this. All right, so I'm going to make this fairly large. All that this menu does is it creates line graphics for us. As if we drew the lines ourselves, it draws them for us. So we have this letter here. Let's say we wanted to actually draw this letter as a satin. Right now it's just running stitches, and that's not what we want, let's say. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to draw satins here. Now we could just go ahead and do this. We could draw some curves, approximate curves. In general, what I found is when you draw curves, especially in a circle, think of this as one big circle that has been kind of elongated. And if you notice, when we do circles, we have 4 curves. So it's generally a good idea with circles to just do the quadrants. If you find that when you do the quadrants, you'll have enough adjustments that you can get this to match pretty good. A lot of times people add too many curves, and then there's just too many points to adjust. So what we're going to do here is we're going to move these to roughly the center of this P. And then we're going to turn it into a manual satin. And we're going to adjust them so it matches the P. So we choose manual satin here. You notice that we have a satin. And now at this point, we can go ahead and move these points out to start matching the P. Borders. And this is what you do to do letters and other objects. You just basically start moving and manipulating these curves. Again, EmbroideryWare is all determined by the curves. You just move these over to where you need. All right, you can probably get the idea. So you just move these points out, and then you end up having the P. Now, rather than doing it in those 2 steps where we have to move a lot of points, there's a shortcut to creating a manual satin called columns. Now, so in the embroidery business, they call them columns, but simply in EmbroideryWare, they're just a manual satin way. So instead of drawing the center line and then drawing or turning it into a manual satin and then moving all the points, we can draw the outside points instead. So when you choose this tool, a curve column or a line column, these are just like drawing lines. But now we're drawing the outside children instead of the center. So if we go here and here, we go ahead and draw these, you can see we get an outside and an inside line to draw. And they're basically, we're drawing the children, not the center line, the parent. The parent will be derived from these children once we finish drawing. So we got finished drawing here. And you'll notice that now we have a satin, and we still had to do a little bit of adjustment, but it's not as many adjustments as you had to do with the other methodology. Sometimes it's a good idea to turn the stitches off, which is a little football. You click that, you can turn the stitches off. And then you can adjust them to your P. And that's pretty much it for satins. We covered automatic satins, we covered manual satins, and you can see that you can create some pretty neat stuff by just these two methodologies. Again, we're just moving the lines and curves, and then EmbroideryWare figures out how to draw the curves for the object. And then we have the start of our piece.